sorry, one class. All right. Before we went on break, we said that we were trying to learn how to develop a business case. We said the appropriate way to do this is to tie it back to the key drivers of RECP and IE. We said that, one of those things is rising costs. And we said rather than going to the CEO or the CFO, for example, and simply saying, I want to buy solar panels. If you say that to the CFO and you say to him it's 150 million naira, the CEO or CFO is likely going to walk you out of their office. But we said when you go to them and you tie it back to the potential for lower production cost and increased margin, that there's a higher potential for you to get their ears to listen to what you're about to say. In fact, we gave the example of saying that we spend 400 million naira annually on diesel, and that you can pitch to them to say that it would cost just 150 million naira to do, the solar panels, and that the CFO is likely going to say, well, that means 250 million naira in savings. And we said to ourselves, no. In fact, what we'll do is to be conservative about it and say that with renewable energy, there's a challenge of intermittence, and because of that, we might still need our diesel generator, and we might still incur another cost of 50 million. We then said, we can even bake in an extra 25 million, and ultimately, we can land on 100 million in savings. All of that to say that if you present your business case by tying it back to lower production cost and improved margins, there's a higher chance of getting approved. The other thing was the environmental compliance angle. We said with environmental compliance, it goes beyond the penalty or the fine that you would pay. Now, what's even more important are the hidden costs, hidden reputational costs, attached to non-compliance with environmental laws. We gave the example of the company in the UK that, did not fix their pipes, and because of that, investors pulled out, and now, they're scampering around looking for investors. And so the only cost they incurred wasn't just the cost of the non-compliance, they had cost of lost investors, lost revenue, reputational risk, heightened, and the likes. And then we said that the other bit is the potential to enter new markets. If you go and present your business case by saying that, we can either enter new markets or retain our position in the markets that we currently play in, it's another way to develop your, to deliver your business case. We gave the example, don't forget the example we gave. We gave the example of the EU, that there's a carbon border adjustment mechanism now, and that you can say to them, well, if we reduce our emissions, we're able to help our, business partners, our trading partners on the other end to meet their own, their own regulatory requirements. And in that way, we would either retain our place as trading partners or, in fact, more importantly, expand the amount of trading partners that we now have. And then finally, we spoke about cost of capital. We said our mommy there, who is a finance person, will be most interested in this. We said that the cost of raising finance from a commercial bank today in Nigeria is 30% plus. We had a doubting Thomas in the class that said, no, I don't believe that BOI will give us loan at 10%. You recall that that's how we ended this session. We said that do not be a doubting Thomas. Touch the side of my body, and you see that the nails, in fact, did go there. And we said the way we'll prove it to you is that we'll bring BOI up at some point to tell us not only the products that are relevant to this particular training, but they would, in fact, go a step further and tell us more and other products that they have available. That's where we landed before we all went for break. Now that the tea has settled and the chicken and whatever else we ate has settled, it is time to fire down. And it is 170 kilometers per hour. All right. So now we've gone at this from the perspective of the key drivers of RECP and IE. We're saying that how do you translate this, though, into business value? I said if you do not remember anything for this training, you should remember this one thing, that when you are presenting your business case from an RECP or IE perspective, you should always find the balance between values and value. We said that's important because if you were going to do this project and it is your own company's money you would use, you can say that it is for environmental reasons. You can say, in fact, that you just have more than enough money that you know what to do with. But if you we'll go and meet capital providers who already have a limited amount of capital and they have an unlimited sources of places they can put the money into. Like my mommy here that puts money into FGM bonds that is risk-free. We said if, one class, please. We said that if you want to go and meet external funders, what that means is that you've got to present your case in a way that shows value and not only values. So what are the three critical things that you have to show? Whether you're talking about this from a cost perspective or from an environmental compliance perspective or from a new market entry perspective or from a cost of capital perspective. First, when you frame your RECP project, frame it as a profitability and resilience measure, not just an environmental measure. Not because the environmental element isn't important. In fact, it is critical. But because you want to go and meet people and you say, is this the right word? Kaokudi? Because you want to go and collect kudi from people, you have to show them the profitability element and the resilience element of your case. The other thing we said is that, or the other important thing is that you have to quantify the potential savings. So very often, people come and just talk about, the profitability element of this. But another way to make your case stronger is to talk about the savings that you get from the energy or water or material use. And I gave an example earlier with the diesel one, where I did not only say that, the amount that we would spend now is just 150 million. I said that there's a potential that we'll be saving 100 million in year one. Not only that, from year 2 onwards, here's the amount we'll be saving. So you want to talk about your cost savings, but the potential savings you should talk about is not only from a financial perspective, you also want to talk about it from a resource perspective. Meaning before, if we were using 100 liters of diesel, all of a sudden now we can say with the deployment of these solar panels, we would be using XYZ, liters now of reduced amount of diesel. So you want to talk about your cost savings. Sometimes you might not even get actual financial savings. It might be that if you do solar, for example, and this is just a random example, it's an anecdote, what you currently spend is 100 million. What you spend in the new case too is 100 million. The way to pitch that kind of case is to talk about the resource savings that you get, right? We will now start using less diesel. We will now start using less water. We will now start using less resources. I've seen a situation before where there's a community, a limited, there's just a body of water that both the community and this mining company uses. There's always community clashes with the mining company. All of a sudden, they deployed a way to use less water, and that alone solved the number of clashes that they had with the community. My point is that when you frame this as a profitability and resilience measure, the other way to make your case stronger is to frame the savings or the cost savings, whether it's from a financial perspective or from a qualitative perspective, what the savings will be. And then the third one is this operational benefit. Remember what I said earlier? I said that every CEO I know during AGM, when they come out, they will say, our people are our greatest. But when there's problem, the first place they go and look for cost savings is from where? These same people. How are you chasing your greatest assets away? I don't know people who will say, this is my best asset. But when things happen, it is the best asset that you first let go of. So I said that there's a way to frame this from an operational perspective. It might be that we'll say that before, when we were using this diesel generator, we used it 24 hours every day. There's the potential now that so we spend a lot on repairs and maintenance. Now, we would not even have to overwork our generators again. Now, the number of times that our people have to work, maybe they used to work from 7 to midnight before, because of this solution that we will deploy, here are the operational efficiencies that we will get from this solution that we're going to deploy. We would have better quality of product as well because the technology that we are using now is a better one. So 3 ways to strengthen your business case, whether you're going at it from one of those 4 drivers, is that frame it as a profitability measure, quantify the potential savings, and then ultimately talk about the operational efficiencies. 170 kilometer per hour. All right, so this framework, I like it. You know why I like it? I developed it. So, and because I am the facilitator today, this is a good framework. When you see another facilitator tomorrow, the person can say this is not a good framework. But me, I'm telling you that it's a good framework. The same way I've been supporting BOI since morning. All right. So now we've said that we've gotten to a point now where we've decided there's a challenge. Maybe, through this UNIDO project, we've done an RECP audit and we've identified certain things, right? How do we go about assessing the projects that we should work on? The first thing, this goes without saying, is that we've identified the gaps, right? We've done an RECP audit, we've identified the gaps. First thing, of course, and it looks obvious, but I promise you sometimes it's not that obvious, is to decide whether we want to do something about it or we do not want to do something about it. Someone says, Olu, but that goes without saying we should do something about it. Sometimes you do your cost-benefit analysis and you realize that the costs outweighs the benefits. And for that reason, you decide we will just keep things business as usual. And so the first step almost goes without saying is that you've got to decide whether these gaps or gap that we've identified, do we want to do something about it today or not? Obviously, when you decide to then do something about it, if that's a decision that you land on, that we want to do something about this issue, first thing is to list out what your solution set is. It's interesting that most times when we think about our solution set, we always think that it has to be some complicated technical solution. Sometimes, and it's important that at this point I should mention that this RECP and IEE, and in fact the general sustainability conversation we are having, it's a journey, not an end in and of itself. Here's what I mean. 20 years ago, solar was something that was so expensive we thought it would never scale. Now the solution is so accessible that there are conversations about how renewable energy presents the lowest cost of energy compared to other sources. Today, we are moving past solar and wind, and we're beginning to talk about geothermal. Nuclear plants they're getting fired up again. My point is that you find a technology today to solve your problem. That does not mean that there will not be another technology tomorrow that will present a better solution. To that end, list out all the possible solutions that can solve that problem. A practical example, we are focused on energy efficiency. We want to reduce our energy use. Someone would likely jump and go straight to solar deployment. No, one solution can be that we'll start turning off our lights. Another solution can be that we'll start using LED bulbs. You see that you can go from something that is cheap and affordable to something that is really expensive, which can be that we'll start generating our power ourselves, e.g. through solar or wind. My point is that when there is a challenge, list out all the solutions. Part of that is because you can decide that we'll start with one and then tomorrow progressively move to the other one. You never want to walk in without giving the solution set that is available. When you identify the solution set, the next thing is what stakeholders will be involved in this project. You see, I have seen a lot of times the engineer will find the solution, will do the costing, and will go and meet Oga, and Oga will say what? No. That's because we haven't brought everybody that is important to the success of that project along. For example, you know that you need finance. Maybe finance will help you to speak the language of returns in a better way that you can ever speak it. So finance start throwing financial jargon like IRR, ROI, like my Oga JC was using before. They will talk about payback period. They will talk about those things that funders would understand, but in it, that you probably cannot speak the language in that way. But more importantly, when you bring a lot of stakeholders to the table, they help to expand your solution set, that's one, but also provide perspectives that you probably do not have before. Here's an example. When people talk about changing bulbs, they just think about the cost of purchasing the new bulbs and installing them and get blindsided and forget that there's a disposal cost for the bulbs that we currently have. But when you have more than one person at the table, there's a potential that even the solution that you've identified, they're able to speak about it from their own perspective. In one of the trainings that we had, I think the one in Anambra, I gave a class exercise, which we'll get to in a second. And it was so interesting to see how, depending on the composition of the table and the professionals at the table, it spoke to what the answer that they provided was. So there was a particular case that I gave, and 2 table groups landed on the same answer, but the approach they took to getting at the answer was different. So while one table group was focused on the financial considerations, because they had, I think there were 5 people, 3 of them were accountants. They were focused on the financial consideration. There was another table where there was a sustainability professional there, and the sustainability professional was able to quantify the environmental impact of a particular solution. Now imagine that both table groups sat together. It would even be a richer, better conversation. My point is, you want to bring all the stakeholders to the table because you get to a better, richer solution. All right. And so when you engage stakeholders, the next step, of course, what the stakeholders would help you do is to do a quantitative and a qualitative assessment of each solution. More often than not, when we say we want to get, for example, we've put out an RFI, a request for information, or an RFP, a request for proposal. We often always we always rank the solutions from a cost perspective mostly, without necessarily thinking about the other considerations that go along with it. So, I gave an example in Lagos of this particular company that wants to build a plant. They bought the land. They've even collected the loan. Everything was great. They got to the land, wanted to start working, and guess what? The community said, no. Where's my finance mommy? In finance, the kind of money that you've spent that you cannot collect again is called sunk costs. Meaning that you see that money, it has done like this. The money has gone far, far. To avoid that kind of a situation, you want to do both a quantitative and a qualitative assessment of the solutions that are available to you. The better example that I like is, sometimes you see a solution. Imagine that the solution set you found is that we would be, bringing this particular thing from, say, a particular part of Nigeria. It will be cheap from that place, and so this provides a cheaper alternative to the way that we currently do business. But in that particular part of the country, we know that there are bandits, right? The problem is that you have not factored in the cost of the lives of your own people that will be going through that route to bring in the material, even though it presents on the surface or from a quantitative perspective a cheaper alternative. And so that's why it's critical that you do not only do a quantitative assessment, but you also do a qualitative assessment. For example, you do a quantitative assessment and you say that it is cheaper to bring this thing from China and not than from Ghana, for example, Random example. But you forget that there is time that your product will spend at the port. This daddy, for example, will not have that problem because it looks like someone that has people at the port. But for some of us like this that do not have people at the port, you have to factor in the time he will spend at the port before he gets here. Another case in point, someone told me they want to bring in a material from Germany. They earn money in Naira. They've taken the loan in Naira. Where do you want to source the FX that you use to buy this thing from? In Nigeria, prices do not answer to the law of gravity. When FX goes up, there's the potential that it would only keep going up. So now you've borrowed the money in Naira. You earn money in Naira. You've spoken to these people. They say they want euros because you want to import German machine. Well, my brother and my sister, the German folks have said this thing costs 100,000 euros. They are not going to change the price. Don't worry, we'll fix the price for you. You get to the day you did the assessment, euro was 1 euro to 2,000 naira, for example. The day you are ultimately ready to deploy capital to pay, they say 1 euro is now 2,120. Well, that 120 naira on each euro, on the 100,000 euro, maybe our sister that has a grant will be the one to provide that money to you. Else, all of a sudden, you're unable to afford the product again. So the quantitative analysis does not even stop at just the cost. It's assessing every single element of this solution. Obviously, once you're done with your quantitative and qualitative assessment, you then want to rank the solutions. Which one is most feasible? And feasibility does not only mean which one makes the most, provides the most impact. Feasibility can stop at which one can we truly afford today. Will we stop at just turning off lights for now, but work towards changing to LED bulbs? Will we move from there to now, deploying our own solar or wind or whatever else it is? Do we move on to getting a more efficient machine next? You want to rank your solutions and select the one that is most feasible, and then you can walk your way. This is part of why it's important that you have a solution set, because it might not just be, the solution set might be such that we know this one gives us the most impact, and we get there in a second, but it has the highest cost. And as it stands today, we don't have that money to spend. But we still want to comply. We still want to have energy efficiency. So can we start with this one as we go along on our sustainability journey? All right. Then we get to the point where, again, my finance mommy will like, which is what? Kudi, how are we going to finance this thing? Critical question. Do we have 100 billion naira that is sitting somewhere, like my sister here? In which case, we can fund the entire thing internally. Or would we have to go externally to finance this project? If we are going to go externally, will it be debt or equity or a mixture of both? Because, for example, this thing can cost 100 million. We have 20 million in our pocket that we're willing to spend on this project, but 80 million naira is left. Maybe we go and meet BOI, and BOI says we can only give you 50 million naira. It means there's still a 30 million gap that we have to fix. So maybe we'll go and meet someone like Dr. Jesse that likes investing in businesses, and we'll go and take equity from him, right? We have to ask ourselves that critical question of how do we fund this project? Once we are able to go through every one of these steps, we would have made a business case. This looks like the same slide. Let me give you a secret about consultants. A consultant will come and meet you and say, I can solve your problem. The consultant knows that the answer can be in 6 slides. But if I come and meet you, and say, I will charge you 500 million naira for this consulting work, and you give me the 500 million, and I go away, and 6 weeks later, I come to you with 6 slides, you will look at me and say, I have not done quality work. So what will I do? I'll come back with 100 slides and now put the 6 slides in front and call it executive summary. But I know that when you read it, because it's 100 slides, you will say that, I don't understand this thing. You will now call me back to come and do implementation plan. But I will not walk away with just that 500 million because I know you have money. So what I will do is that I will tell you that there are certain cost overruns that happened when I was building the 100-page plan. So I'll collect another 50 million from you for cost overruns. I'll say you did not size the problem appropriately. I had to think about there were certain considerations. There was scope creep, is what I will say. So there was an expansion of scope. And so after that, you now say I should come and do implementation. I'll say, oh, you know what, listen, I promise you there will be no cost overruns this time. I mean, I built the business plan. It's not a problem. I would implement it to you and I will give you discount. And so this time I will not charge you 500 million. I'll charge you 250 million. And there will be no cost overruns. But I will collect out of pocket expenses. So how do you do 100 slides when people want, because people want 100 slides, is by creating the same slide and you now put box in the middle of one. All that my story is to tell you why these slides look similar. All right. What this is saying, though, on a more serious note, is that right in the middle of this framework is where the opportunity truly lies. Right in this place is where you would identify your solution set. Right in this place is where you would rank your solutions. You do a quantitative and qualitative analysis of your solution. And that thing, I have called it an opportunity matrix. But it is another way for consultants to use big English. They will say it's an opportunity matrix. All I'm saying is this is where the core and the bulk of the work is before you go and meet BOI. So how do you deal with this opportunity matrix? This is now, we're getting to the interesting part of the training. There are 3 things that are critical for you to think through when you've identified a solution set and you're trying to determine how to rank it. Which one is the most important? Which one should we do first? Which one should we do last? The first thing to check is cost, of course. How expensive is this one compared to the alternative? The next thing is what's the impact of this thing that we want to spend money on? Because sometimes, I promise you, there are things that are expensive but have near zero impact. Or at least their impact is not as, important as the impact that another alternative will present to you. The third element to this is the ease of implementation. How easy is it to implement this thing that we are talking about? And so remember, when I talk about, do a quantitative and a qualitative assessment of the solutions that are available to you, this is a framework for doing that assessment. How expensive is this thing? How easy is it to implement? What's the impact that we will get from this thing? For example, in our minds, we want an energy efficiency. We've got an energy efficiency strategy. Which of the solutions that we've presented, is easiest to implement? Which one is most expensive? Which one has the most impact? When you are able to rank your solution that way, it immediately reveals to you which one you should go for first. All right, so I've given examples of just certain RECP and measures on the screen. And I'll use maybe one or two examples. Replace incandescent bulbs with LED. Well, maybe bulbs are not too expensive. So maybe the cost is cheap. The impact on efficiency is likely going to be medium, right? Like we're using high energy bulbs before. Now we're replacing them with LED bulbs. What's the priority? Well, because we have a strategic priority today to solve our energy consumption, this is high up our list of priority. That's the way to approach this. You can, for example, say, do we switch from diesel to gas-fired boiler? Well, that sounds like something that will be expensive. So maybe the cost, from a cost perspective, maybe the cost is medium. Again, and I should point out that when we say something is expensive or cheap, it's really relative to the pot that is available within the company. I'll give you an example. Microsoft has started, we all know about AI, right? And we know that AI consumes a lot of energy. So a lot of these tech companies are now beginning to look for where to source energy from. The challenge is that they quickly run into problems with, the regulators. Because when you go to them and you say, hey, I'm going to, set up this data center here, and I want most of the energy that you're producing to come to me. The energy producers will say, well, we don't mind. We're willing to sell the energy to you. But the regulator will say, hold on a second. There is a community here that we've got to serve. So why should we, provide the energy to you for data centers when there are human beings living here that need it for, their own, for other reasons? Give me 1 second, sir. What the tech companies are beginning to do now, Microsoft went to the US government and said, let us fire up the 3 Mile Gorge nuclear plant. For them, that is not expensive relative to the business need. They are willing to become a producer of energy because the money that they will make from the use of artificial intelligence trumps, and I used trump intentionally as the English, trumps the amount that they will use to set up, the energy facility. Before, they would have power purchase agreements. Government is beginning to give them problem. Now they're saying we will build the power plants ourselves. So all of this to say that what's expensive to my Oga's company might not be expensive to that bros that says 15 billion is what they make every month. Right? And so when I say high, medium, and low, it's not an absolute. What's expensive is relative to your own company. Even from an impact perspective, what I consider impactful might not be impactful at all to you, right? And that's why I said you always have to tie back your project to the company's strategy. What's the ultimate strategic direction that we want to take? That's what would help you determine what's expensive, what the impact on efficiency is, and what the priority of the project is. Do you have a question?
On the measures, that is the third one, which you said switch from diesel to gas-fired boilers. Why don't you put it to what? As from diesel to CNG?
Great question. I've done this training for a while now, and I know that there will be technical people in class. But I came prepared for people like you. I came prepared for people like you. So, this is an illustrative example. We're just saying that a company has a list of solutions that they are considering. They will list out all of those solutions and decide which one of them do they want to take. I promise you it makes no difference if I change that to CNG because we are not talking necessarily on this slide about the quality of the technology. We're just talking about IEC and RECP measures that have been identified and we're focusing on whether, how can you rank it from a cost perspective, from an impact perspective, and from a priority perspective. In your own company, for example, you might be focused on water. An RECP audit might have been conducted, and one of the measures that will be available is energy. Because the strategic priority for your company in that moment is reduction of water usage, you might decide that, you know what, energy is important, but that's not the strategic priority for us right now. And so we would say that's not a priority. All of this is important, and I'm hammering on it to say that there are no absolutes here. Step one is, what's our company's strategy? What's important to us today? In light of the RECP measures that have now been presented to us following an RECP audit, what do we think is most important to us today? Because if you take a tactical approach towards solving your company's problem, BOI, they are very smart people. When you go and you present the solution to them, what would ultimately be uncovered is, well, we think that the most important challenge to your business today is water. Why are you putting the money into XYZ? Do you understand? But if you have taken a strategic approach to solving the problem, you can say, well, we pump our water by ourselves using diesel generators. Well, by switching to a more energy effective way, we have used one stone to kill two birds. You see that because there is a strategic priority and alignment there, it's easy for you to then point back and respond to them that even though it looks like we've solved for energy, we've solved for not only energy, but also water usage. All right. I came prepared. I've been talking all day. This is the part where it's your turn to talk. What I'm going to do is that we'll put ourselves into table groups like this. And what I just explained to us, i.e., looking at solutions, our RECP solutions, let's take the approach of cost, impact, and ease of implementation and rank each one of these using those measures. Meaning, you will take LED retrofit in packaging area and say, do we think this thing will be expensive? Do we think it will be easy to implement? And do we think that, it would have a lot of impact? You're going to rank it across high, medium, low. So, this is a mid-sized bottling company in, we should change this to Lugbe. It's a bottling company in Lugbe that, has conducted an RECP audit, and here are the measures that have come up for them. Part of what you should do is to decide in your table group what's your strategic priority. This is what we think is important to us. And then rank each one of these solutions on cost, ease of implementation, and impact. Yes, ma'am.
You said RECP measures, but I'm seeing only energy measures. Still energy. I'm not saying water. I'm not saying the use of water. I'm not saying the chemicals.
You know what she said? She said, guys, you said RECP measures, but I'm only seeing energy-related measure. Great point. I came prepared for people like you. Came prepared. When we were talking about resource efficiency earlier, we said those resources range from water, raw materials, and energy. The point, though, is what's important, or what we're trying to take out of this particular exercise, is to focus on how do you look at measures and rank them across costs, ease of implementation, and impact. All right. So how do we do this table grouping now? Because the other, that's one table already. That table, I've already appointed you as one table. From here like this to this place. That's another table. These are 4 daddies. Ah, no. From here to here like this, 1 table. Here to here like this, another table group. We have 4 companies. No. So we're intentionally mixing it up, like with finance people, because the point is that, remember we said you should bring all stakeholders to the table. So I want a mix. I want there to be finance people. I want there to be companies. I want all of those to happen. The only question I have is that the same company? Are those people from the same company, the 4 of you? Perfect. All right. So these 2 people, they've been liaising since morning. Mommy and Madam Doubting Thomas. So I want to split you. Yeah. The 3 of you are from the same place. No. No. So let's switch. I like. So we want 4 table groups. We want 4 table groups, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Help me. Okay, so they will know their numbers. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. All right. No, you won't. All right. 5. 5. 5. 4. All right. Yeah. So the ones should go and sit together, the 2s together, the 3s together, the 4s together, the 5s together. Let's do it. Yeah, I will. I will. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Oh, you got lucky. This is 2, right? So we've got 15 minutes. That 15 minutes is even too much already. I would explain again. Once we get into our table groups, I would explain again. It looks like people need one more explanation. Three. My guy is looking for 3. Oh. 1, 2. That's 3. 5 in the middle. You can map RECP or IE measures across 3 items. You can map it on cost, on ease of implementation, or on impact. More often than not, people map these things just maybe on cost alone, or on ease of implementation alone, or on impact alone. And I've said what this framework does is to make you consider both quantitative and qualitative assessment of each of the solutions that you've identified. And so we gave the example of, the replacing incandescent bulbs with LED. That in this particular case, the company decided that we think REC LED bulbs are affordable. And so for them, they said the cost is low. They've said that from an energy efficiency perspective, they would get a medium impact on efficiency. And that for them, energy is critical to their operation. And so they've said the priority is high. So I said that there's now this mid-sized bottling plant in Lugbe that has just completed an RECP audit. And these are the items that have been identified. These are the measures that have been identified or are currently being considered. I said select each one of the measure and as a table group, discuss on whether the measure you think it will be expensive, discuss on what the impact will be, and then discuss on ease of implementation. And when we are done, we're going to debrief in our table groups. All right, so our time starts now, and we have just 10 minutes. Before we debrief at all, I want one person, a volunteer, to tell me how this felt. Like, what was the process like on your table? See, some people are still arguing. As a table group. Like, did you guys argue in your table group? Did you just immediately agree with each other? There was someone saying we need light. Another person said we don't need light. Someone said we just need a little light. Can someone just volunteer to tell me what the process was like on your table?
Thank you. On my table, table 3, I think it reminded me of the fact that we had to bring in stakeholders. The kind of experience that one would go through if you have to engage stakeholders where one person from the finance perspective may disagree with somebody speaking from the sustainability perspective and the business perspective. That kind of engagement is what we experienced on this table.
This bros, you'll be the one to debrief us next. See, what you just said, right? Actually, before I talk about what you said, the evidence of a good facilitator is that when you are done, you would have created facilitators. This bros now just stole my point. And I worry they will not call me back in September. But I came prepared for people like you. On a serious note, though, the reason why I said we should talk about the experience first is because this is exactly what would happen when you bring together different stakeholders. If we were all engineers on a table, we'll quickly talk about kilowatt hours and we'll talk about energy efficiencies and we'll speak language that we understand. Make no mistake, when I tell you to bring in other stakeholders, you would initially disagree. There will be a lot of, I'm a finance person, from a cost perspective, this does not work. Whereas the engineer will say, if it is energy efficiency you are focused on, this is the only solution that will work. So it's always nice and beautiful when we say engage stakeholders. Please understand that when you engage stakeholders, there will be a lot of tension in the room. But what you should never lose sight of, and this is a way to practicalize tying things back to the strategic priority of the company. Because when you say this is too expensive and one person says it is too affordable, we can at least agree on a common ground. Energy efficiency is the priority. So if someone is talking about water, we can at least quickly say that is not our priority today. So I like the fact that I saw someone saying we need lights, we don't need lights. We need power, we don't need power. That's the kind of conversation and healthy tension that would happen when you engage stakeholders. The other side of that coin, though, is that sometimes there might be too many cooks in the room. And I saw it happen at a particular table. Not that there were too many cooks at the table, but you have to know the appropriate time to engage certain stakeholders. So there's a table group that has someone from human resources. And that person was saying to me, they're speaking technical language, they're speaking, finance language. I'm just from HR. I don't know what to say in this particular conversation. Perhaps it's best when we have landed on the solution to say, maybe we'll need 5 more people. At that point, let us engage HR to say, how do we source the necessary talent? So in engaging other stakeholders, it's also critical that you know at what point should we engage what people. If you bring HR to the table earlier than you should, HR will say, let us recruit more people. Or I don't understand what they are talking about. All right. So we're going to debrief now. And because of time, we'll probably debrief it 1 or 2 tables. When we started this training, somebody was begging for volunteer. Me, I don't beg for volunteer. Is there any table that wants to volunteer now? Because I already have a table in mind that I will point to. Any table wants to volunteer. I trust you. because she has 100 billion naira grant that she wants to.
Good afternoon. I'm Khadija from Federal Ministry of Environment. With our table, Group 2, what we were able to come up with. Sorry. Okay.
Go for compliance exercise.
Okay. LED retrofit in packaging area. We decided that the cost obviously is low because to change from whichever bulb to LED is quite affordable. Then the impact on efficiency is high because it will still deliver the same, it will still do the same work and at a lower expense. And the ease of implementation, we decided it's low because it's easy to implement. And our strategic priority for the company is energy efficiency, so that's high priority. So number 2, our compressed air system leak air. The cost is medium, but the impact on efficiency, it's high. And the ease of implementation, due to our engineer says it's low. So, yes, on our, yes.
We're not exactly certain whether this thing is easy to implement or not. But thankfully, we had an engineer at the table
Yes,
who could say to us immediately, like, guys,
this is easy. Yes,
so rather
exactly.
than going into ChatGPT or cracking their heads, an engineer was really able to say to them,
It's
guys, don't
easy
worry
to
about
do it. Yes. Okay. So, and our strategic priority tells us it's high since it works and the cost is medium.
it. Please, can we give Madam a round of applause? Because of time, we'll look for another table that will take the last 2. And because we already got a table from this side of the room, let's walk towards the back of the room and see, is there any table? No, you already volunteered. In fact, by the powers vested on me, I'll give it to this table. Who wants to volunteer? Just tell us.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone.
Sorry, one class.
So, our strategy for the mid-size juice bottling plant is energy efficiency, and that simply means reduction in energy consumption along the production line. And so, looking at the measures considered, the first one is LED retrofits in packaging area. Oh, the last two. I'm so sorry. Okay. So heat recovery from pasteurization unit. Yeah, heat recovery involves some capital works in terms of, and he'll be talking about heat exchangers and a lot of things in that. I don't want to go technical, but I know the cost is high. I'm a professor of energy engineering.
Thank you. Continue.
And so the impact is medium, and then it's not easy to implement. And then the last one is switch from diesel to gas fired. The cost is relative. If you look at the cost of the fuel, it's cheaper than diesel. But if you look at converting the boilers, it's not it raises the cost. So depending on what you're looking at, the cost of the fuel you're changing is cheaper, but the boiler installation is on the high side. And so the impact is high. If you use a CNG gas-fired boiler, you're going to see a high impact. And then it's relatively easy to implement. Yes.
Please give this table a round of applause. You see, I said to them in Anambra that I suspect that there will be very technical people in the room in Abuja. As someone that foresees things a lot, I saw it. So what, I like the fact that you said there's a particular solution that we've looked at, and the cost really depends on, the technology. It depends on a number of items. We're not even just necessarily saying here's what the price is, halas. We're saying that there are a number of considerations even within the cost, yeah, that will tell us whether this will be expensive or whether it will be cheap. And that's the point ultimately that I also want to get at. That sometimes the cost is not this is bottled water costs 20 naira. Sometimes you would say that is this for those of you in the room that are fancy. When you go to all the fancy restaurants that you go to, and you say you want water, or you want water. You say you want water. What question do they usually ask you? No, that one is Jevnik question. They will say still or sparkling. Meaning that the price of water depends on whether it is still or sparkling. And that's the point she just made. That sometimes just simply saying we're switching from diesel to gas-fired boiler might require a lot more questions. Again, it takes us back to that point. If there's an engineer in the room, the engineer can say, hey guys, when you say gas-fired boiler, what exactly do we mean? All right. Now, I should say that any answer that we put in the class, and I've said this I've implied this, repeatedly through the session today, that there are no absolute answers in this session. The important thing is that you're taking away the framework, because for this juice company, something might be affordable. For another company, it might just be expensive. And so as we go along and I start putting answers up, it's just within the context within which, that particular company has assessed it. All right, so I like this particular answer because it's not an answer in and of itself. It just throws different considerations at us, right? So LED retrofits in this particular case, they said, oh, well, it's low cost and it's easy to implement, So that particular one considered cost and ease of implementation. The other one, compressed air system leak, says, well, I'll just look at impact. This was identified by an RECP audit, and so we think this will save a lot of energy. That's the way that this was, assessed. Heat recovery from pasteurization units says, well, this is technically feasible, but we think that it would involve a lot of high upfront cost. Final one says, well, we will get fuel savings if we switch from diesel, but we will need to convert our boiler, right? The point ultimately is that you want to look for quick wins and then prioritize those. All right. Someone asked me though, like, no, sit here. Don't you like these people? All right. There's another framework, and I personally prefer this framework because I can be a visual person. This framework is called a cost impact matrix, and what it does is to use a 2x2 matrix to prioritize, RECP or IEE options. 2x2 matrices are used, across board, not just in RECP or IEE or in, I'm sure a lot of us have seen 2x2 matrix in the past, right? And so what we've done is to say you can rank things across impact and cost. And so you draw a 2x2 matrix and say this is high impact, low impact, high cost, low cost, and very quickly, if you're in the room with finance people and energy people and all of those, you can all agree on where to place each of those and decide which quadrant is most important to you. Now, the most important quadrant usually is high impact, low cost. If there is a way to deploy something that will be low cost but translates into high impact, that's the exact place where you want to be playing in. And so what we did was to take the question from before and tried to plot this across, the 2x2 matrix. So someone says, well, LED retrofits, don't forget, this is just in the packaging area. So, well, while we'll save a bit of energy, but it might not be a ton of energy because it's just limited to the packaging area. And so for that person, they decided, well, this is low cost, obviously, but the impact might also be low relative to the energy efficiency that we're trying to get across the board. Someone says, well, the cost to fix compressed air leaks. They looked at it and said, well, this isn't too expensive, but because an RECP audit identified it, it would have a high impact from this because this leak is what has been costing us since all these days. So for them, it is high impact, and on and on and on like that, right? The other two, these gas boilers will be expensive, man. But then it's high cost, but we know that it will give us high impact. This pasteurization unit, we've gone to the market and it's actually expensive, but it will give us high impact. All right. Again, because I've been talking since morning, we are going to use this 2x2 matrix now in our table groups. This bakery is not in Enugu this time. This bakery is in Gwagwalada. I said Abuja is near and dear to my heart. You think I was joking? In fact, my uncle used to work in Abuja and they used to live in Wuse too. So I know a bit about this city. You'll be surprised. So this particular bakery, see that bros looks like this our HR bros. They've identified these RSP and IE options, right? And what we want to do is to take the 2x2 matrix now and plot these options across high impact, low impact, high cost, low cost. Is that simple enough? All right. How many minutes should we give? 5 is fine. 10 is too small. All right. So she said 10 minutes. You see, this one is democracy. Someone in class that said 10 minutes is enough. So we'll take 10 minutes and we'll reconvene at 5 minutes to 2. All right. So the same table groups, I want us to put this within all right. Let's get started. Interestingly, the thing come after we don't finalize it. Timing gone aligned. Yeah, which is what I mean. And we said when you want to ultimately prioritize, if there's a world where there's something that is cheap but has high impact, perhaps that's the one you should prioritize. But we want to debrief now. And there's a table that constantly argues. But I'm sure that they will say that it's not argument, it's a healthy debate. Or they will say it's not argument, it's constructive criticisms among each other. We'll find out now how constructive the criticism is and how healthy the debate has been. All right, so I know it.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ego Abba Kingsley, representing HSM International Limited. So, and representing Table 1, Group 1, the best group so far. So, from the explanation our instructor has given to us about the 2x2 metrics and following our debate, as you call it, the healthy debates, we concluded that, can we have the diagram? Or can we all just imagine the diagram? There's an high impact. there's an high impact. We did it the same way like this. High impact here, high cost, low cost, low impact. So can we go back? So I will just, with the point one, we said posting energy saving signages for staff. That is a low cost and high impact. The low cost and high impact. Fixing oven doors, seals to reduce heat loss. To us also, this is a low cost because the statement there was fixing, not installing. Not installing, it was fixing. That means there was an oven door, but maybe it had one or two. So we had to just fix new oven door seals to reduce heat. So yeah, so fixing, not installing. So there was a door initially, so maybe there was so it's just low cost. No, the door they said door seals. So it's not even the door. It's a seal. It's a seal. It's a seal. So there was a so that's to reduce that. So the impact is high. Yes, sir. Yes. 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 It was not there before. No, that's to your own company, but my company we had it there before. We had it there before, so our company we had it there before. Yes. Yes. For you it is to install, but we are but ours. Yes. Yeah. One, yes. We had it. Yes. It was there. We are just fixing it. So that's a low cost because the engineer is collecting his salary. So that's his duty. And the impact, the engineer is collecting his salary, so the cost is low. I don't need to pay an external body. And the heat recovery is going to give us a good impact because we have our bread bakes in time. Impact. Installing high efficiency rotary oven. This is high cost and high impact. Switching off idle mixers. Okay.
Is there any group that has a solution that's slightly different across the first three that is described? So it says posting energy saving signage for staff. For their own company, they believe that this is low cost, high impact. Is there any group that thinks it's low cost, low impact? All right. Do you want to tell us why you think it's low cost, low impact?
Yes, it's a low cost, yes, posting an energy saving signage. But if we look at it, this is more of a manufacturing setup where the focus is on energy, right? So it's not like a safety issue. So it's where if it had been the safety signage, caution there, exit there, that would be. But for energy efficiency issues, posting energy signage is of low impact. Yeah.
Thank you, ma. Sorry, wait. This table, they like argument. All right. Okay.
Madam, sorry, Professor. So why I said this has an high impact is, according from the beginning of this training, there was a part for compliance. So if Nezra comes to my office or maybe an HSE expert comes to my company and there are no signages, do you know I'll be penalized for that? So you see, it has an high impact. The impact is very, very high and the cost is low. Thank you.
All right.
So are you done?
Sorry, I want to move to another table. All right. Please give him a round of applause. And we'll come back to the first one. Because like I said, we spent... All right. You want to say something?
Thank you. My name is Benga Olukede from Energy
The
Commission.
engineer in front.
Engineer. Now, the issue of the energy signage,
Yes.
the reason why I supported them that is low cost, high impact. Now, in so many, like this industry now, probably they have administrative blocks where they use AC, everything. All this signage that turn off the AC when you are not in the office. it has high impact on energy savings. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. We will come back to this one. I intentionally placed this one there. We'll come back to it. So I need another table to talk us through their own solution. And the table I have in mind is this table that is sitting right here. So can you walk us through maybe the next three? Switching off idle mixers and conveyor belts, switching from generators, diesel generator to solar power. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Peter. I'm representing
Hi, Peter.
Company 5. Yeah, all right. So, switching off idle mixers and conveyor belts. So, we believe this is obviously low cost, but the impact, because in this bakery setting, our bakery now, the conveyor belts we're using and the mixers are not really, it's a small bakery. So, the conveyor belts are in a bakery in Golada. We're only serving people in Golada. So it's a small bakery, so the conveyor belts are not heavy conveyor belts. They're really small. They're just moving, and they're not moving at very high speeds. So the energy saving might not be really high impact generally per se on the overall energy usage. So we are saying low cost, low impact. Then moving to the next one, we have switching from diesel generator to solar hybrid system. Now this is obviously high cost, high impact, because obviously when you look at how much energy solar will save you eventually, you'll be grateful for it. So, but it costs a lot. It costs a lot because even if we're saying it's a small bakery, the major ovens that we'll be using might be very highly energy consuming. So that might be a lot. So high energy, high cost, high impact. Then full HVAC upgrade. HVAC upgrade is too important, as we say. So it is high cost, high impact, because it takes a lot to maintain the ACs, the heating, the ventilation in the system. Even here, if the HVAC is not working, we won't be able to sit here. So in every block, every office, there must be proper HVAC function. So it is high cost, high impact. Thank you.
Insulating hot water.
Okay.
We don't want to
so
insulate.
no. Insulating hot water pipes. So the insulating material is generally low cost, right? But we're saving a lot of energy eventually. So we're saying it is low cost, high impact.
Please give them a round of applause. All right. It's interesting that we went through this exercise and I did not write any cost on the board. So how did we land on what's low cost and what's high cost? How did we decide what's high impact, even though none of us spoke about the strategic priority of the company? Do not forget that when you want to talk about cost or impact, it really comes down to your company's strategic priority and financial position or financial wherewithal. So what I consider as high cost might just be low cost to this other company. What I consider high impact might just be low impact to another company. It really comes down to the strategic priority and the strategic direction of the company. But before I leave this place, let's talk about this posting energy saving signage for staff. I will tell you that one of the things I've heard as arguments for why it is low cost and low impact or low cost and high impact. This one, every single place I go to, we would always argue. Someone said, we can just buy signboard. Someone said, signboard is too expensive. We will buy cardboard. I will volunteer the marker. I will paste the cardboard. I am not making this up. Like in trying to make their point, someone said signage is too expensive. We can use stickers. There were English professors in that class as well. You know, someone said I'll use cardboard. Someone said that's the reason why it's low cost. Someone even made the argument similar to your argument that if I'm rushing out for lunch and I see the signage or the sticker or the cardboard, that will remind me to do the needful, and I'll turn off, the necessary appliance. And that would save energy. And as such, it is high impact. I promise you that what will make this high impact or low impact really comes down to the culture within the organization. Have you gone to places where you will see, do not urinate here? The fine is 500,000 naira. And you will see 5 people lined up there. And they are piping in that same place. Have you gone to places where they will write post no bill? And you will see political parties paste beyond bill there. I think that the point that you're trying to make is how much energy truly does this help us save if we're just talking about turning off and switching on and turning on appliances. I think that the other person is saying this will remind us to turn off and turn on things. I think the way this is high impact or low impact really comes down to the cultural nuances across organizations. I think that if we design a strategy around this, for example, that says the department that has the most energy savings purely from switching off appliances will get such and such, would see that the signages or stickers would help to drive some change. If we say that we are not going to use only the carrot approach, but would also use the carrot and stick approach, that the department with the lowest, savings will get impacted in such and such way, would see that it will drive behavioral change. The stickers in and of themselves do not have any power. It's a cultural nuance of the organization that will determine whether there is any change. Forget impact, whether people would yield to it or not. People will stand in front of that sticker and gist there and read it and not do anything about it. It really comes down to the behavioral patterns. So as we think about our solutions as well, I'm saying sometimes the difference between high impact and low impact are the compliance instruments that we use and we deploy that sometimes will tilt things from high impact to low impact or from low impact to high impact. And thankfully, there's an HR person here. I told you, everybody has a part to play in this thing. So at that point, we'll now bring this our HR friend to say, what's the appropriate carrot and the appropriate stick to use in this situation? So you see that you have a part to play in this our journey.
Thank you, sir. In the course of your training, you mentioned the reputational risk to companies, due to non-compliance to environmental things. Now, if they put a sign that do not enter without using a nose mask, they know the kind of chemicals that are in there, that as soon as you enter and you inhale it, the person might faint, and more accumulation of that chemical in the body can lead to a dangerous situation. And a staff passes the place, enters without a nose mask. If the person has any health issue, and there are some area in this country, what they want is to go into court and to laying claims to get money. In that case, that sticker will speak for that company, for its reputation. It might cost them money to take that person to the hospital, but the reputation will be saved.
Thanks. That's a great. But you see, I came prepared for people like. I came prepared. I knew there will be people like you that will say things like this. And it was revealed to me. So I came prepared for people like you. So now you are conflating safety signage with an energy-saving signage. They're conflating two issues, and you spoke about that if this was a safety signage, perhaps the impact would be a lot more. I know, this table, I like you.
I thought when you said energy saving signages, I was thinking maybe the signages, most signages use electricity. So I was thinking those signages are the ones that use less electricity. To me, you see why I said it's a different thing now. So I was thinking the signages, regardless of safety, regardless of security, regardless of I don't just know. But all I know was that maybe the signages were made from maybe LED bulbs. That was what I was thinking.
But we said posting. So this table is the English table. This table is do you understand? But I came prepared for people like you. I came.
Is a question because I want us to clarify something when we speak about energy efficiency. From the definition, we say it's reducing energy consumption. Is it in quantity that we define energy efficiency? Because if I reduce my consumption by 1 unit, I have done something. So it's of high impact. You understand? Okay, for example, in our homes, in a month, I use like 100 units every month. But putting behavioral pattern changes into my consumption, or into my pattern, you understand? I off my AC when nobody is in the room, and at the end of the month, I see that the next purchase is just 7,000 naira. I've reduced something. Is that no energy efficiency? So it's not in quantity. Even if it is 1 kilowatt hour, I think I've done something.
You see, there are engineers. I knew when I was coming to this training that there will be what? There will be engineers in the room. But you guess what? I came prepared for people like you. I came prepared. Remember that we said that what constitutes impact to one company comes to the strategic priority of that company. A company can decide that saving 1 kilowatt hour makes no difference to them. That for them, it is when they save 10,000 kilowatts hour. Another company can decide that saving 50 kilowatts is what is important. Impact is usually the most tricky one to determine because with cost, you can immediately say, we have 70 million. This thing costs 100 million. It's high cost. This thing costs 50 million. It's high cost. Ease of implementation might be easy also to land on. The engineer will tell you it takes 5 days. It will take such and such man hours. We can quickly decide. Impact is usually tricky. And the way that we solve for what's high impact or low impact is how it ties back to the strategic priority of the company. Do you think if Microsoft solves for 1 kilowatt, do you think that has changed anything for them? And so when you say is it quantity or quality, I would say to you that what's important is the strategic priority of that company. Impact is as defined by the company, by the strategic priority of the company. And so it's not so much about did we go from 7,000 to 3,000? It's what do we think is priority to this company. It's why I've said, let's not look at this from just cost alone. Let's not look at it from just ease of implementation alone. Let's look at it holistically and think about all the different elements that would ultimately help us land on what is high and what is low.
1 minute. Put the timer. You see, from what all we have been saying is very clear. And Olu has been very, hitting on one point. Companies, they differ. Priorities differ. Probably because of how much money you have or your line of production. Probably where you are, what kind of energy consumption or energy need you are using, or you are using at that point. NNPC, for example, does not care about energy in a refinery because they produce the energy. So we are not talking about energy efficiency They may be doing that, but like we want to save 10,000 by switching off lights. Let the light burn. You get it? That's NNPC because they are producing the energy. To them, that is not the impact. It's not the priority, I mean to say. But what I want you to notice here, going forward, the terminologies, and I so love Ulu very well, because we are reading, well, we are touching the elephant from different sides. The same elephant. The way the words are put together, you can read it differently from different companies. Agreed? However, it's still the elephant. Are you getting it? That is why it is very, very good you have 5, 4, 3 on a table to look at it and say, come, are we answering the question? Is it as it is written? Are we really looking at it and saying, we answered the question correctly? It goes back and forth where Olu said, why would a company or a bank give you 5 million and not 10 million that you requested for? Because you may be reading different meanings to different things. You get it?
Thank you, Oga Jesse. See, I will come back in September, I promise you. By God's grace. And Madam Finances, I will be expecting you. All right. So I guess the point ultimately is
It's more like a clarification I just need. Now, this strategic priority of an organization, and can that strategic priority be also defined by regulatory agencies? I want a clarification on that. Rather than the organization just setting its own strategy.
That's such a great question. You'd recall that we said there are 4 drivers of RECP/IE in Nigeria. And one of the things we said was environmental compliance, right? So a company can decide that for us, compliance is what's really important for us. And so they will sit down and say, what are the regulatory loopholes would have to jump across? And for us, that's strategy that's what is important to us. And so they can say that here are the regulators that are available, here are the ones that are most critical to the survival of our business, and here are the ones that are not too critical, that cannot really have too much reputational damage on us. So these are the ones we would focus on. So to answer your question, yes, like that also bakes into how certain companies determine. So we did some strategic work recently at my company. We're trying to come up with, so we have something called a climate action plan, and that plan was focused on our investment portfolio, meaning we said, how do we reduce energy emissions from an investment perspective? And so we'll tell our portfolio companies, here's what you should do, here's what you should not do. You should have a net zero plan, you should have this and that. But we said, hold on a second, we are the ones requesting for people to do this. How about we turn the light on ourselves? And where I'm getting at is when we started looking at peers to say, how do these peers position themselves when they try to come up with a corporate strategy for emissions? We put them into different personas, and there are certain personas meaning this is the way that they behave. And there are certain companies where for them, their strategy is compliance driven. There's an ISSB framework now that says that you should comply with S1 and S2, IFRS S1 and S2. That's what will drive the development of our sustainability report. The other companies that say, no, we want to be, the leader in this space. So for them, it's not compliance that drives their strategy. It is this need to be a leader in the space that drives their strategy. I told you about certain banks that they only have a green fund because their investors have said you should have a green fund. Where there are other banks who, for them, this is a way to drive more products. So we've We've done retail banking, we've done commercial banking. How else do we expand our product? Well, maybe we can do green funding. You see that both banks have green pots, but they have it for different reasons. And the way they would approach it will be different. And so, yes, there are certain companies who their strategy is driven by compliance. There are other companies who, because of the nature of the industry they are, they've got to also prioritize compliance. So there are certain industries that must prioritize health and safety just because of the nature of the business that they are in. You see that I came prepared for people like you. All right. The clicker in Abuja has stopped working. But it's now working. You say it's not possible. All right, so this is an illustrative solution. In this case, we said posting signage is not LED signage. But in your own company, maybe that's what it means. Again, you'll see that I've called this illustrative solution. I did not say it's an absolute solution. I say this is an illustrative solution. The takeaway is not that this is the correct answer. The takeaway is that when you're in your own company, you've got to think about what's impactful and what's costly. And that will then help you decide, where you place each of the drivers or the mechanisms that are available. And we said the key takeaway is that you should tackle high impact, low cost items first, because it goes without saying that this presents the highest return on investment. All right. People are becoming sleepy, so we'll speed through this because it looks like I'm the one in between you and lunch. All right, so what kind of questions, when you get into these groups at work, what kind of questions would help you move away from arguing to actually tackling the problem at hand? Rather than saying, what's the English word for this? What questions help you to get to the root of the matter? What problem are we actually trying to solve? Or what opportunity currently exists? Another question can be, what will future states look like upon implementation? I find that a lot of people do not ask themselves, if we deploy this solar, how does it change our behavior? What does it change in our business? People don't think about what the future states will look like. People just say, let's embrace AI, for example. How does this impact my own job going forward? I'm not even saying from a I'll lose my job perspective. I'm saying, how does it help to, make my job better? You'd have, in schools before now, you say you have Turnitin, meaning that if you submit something, if you have plagiarized in the past, this thing will catch it. Well, we're seeing situations where you turn something in and you say it is AI that wrote it, when in actual fact you're the one that wrote it. So even higher institutions are beginning to rethink the impact of AI on education. Because I can provide this case study and some students will just sit down and they will submit in time. But it was just because they popped the question into a chatbot, into a large language model. Right? So I'm saying every time we want to think about the deployment of a solution, you want to think about how does this impact our business going forward? From a project milestone perspective, you will notice that we said LED in the packaging room. For them, it might be that let's try and deploy this in the packaging room, see what the savings will be before we deploy it at full scale. So sometimes you want to, when in deploying a solution, you want to think about what the MVP is. Start first from, take a phased approach, start first with something simple, learn from it before you deploy it at scale. Sometimes that's just not feasible. But I'm saying, depending on what the solution is, that might be some question that you would ask yourself. I see people deploy a solution without having metrics. Haba. Haba. Like, you need progress markers. That's what that means. What are the key milestones? What are we working towards? I've seen situations, to your point, where you deploy something, maybe you get a 2,000 naira savings, and you'd say, oh, we've done well. The reason why you think you've done well, though, is because you do not know that that thing has the potential to give you a 5,000 naira savings, right? So you want progress markers like that, and then you want to check with other organizations how much savings do you get, or did you get when you deployed this, relative to what we are getting internally. You also want to report. All right, I'm going to speed through this. This is just saying you want to ask yourself, what are the operating costs before we implement this project? And those operating costs are not limited to, they're not limited to just, remember what we said, it's not just finance, it is resource as well. How much more energy consumption? How much is the energy consumption today? What are the labor costs? Company image. What's our company image today because we are producing in this not so clean way? And then what would the cost be following the implementation of the project? So, does freshwater consumption suddenly go down now that we've deployed this solution? Does maintenance cost go up? Because there's certain solutions that you deploy and you have to be maintaining it every day. Does that drive up maintenance cost? So you want to ask yourself two critical questions. What are the costs before implementation? What are the costs after implementation? That's what all this is talking about. I'll give us 5 minutes to stretch our legs, and then we'll get into how to prepare a bankable business plan. At this point, you can decide to go back to your seat. And I intentionally said final lap because at least that way you can focus a bit before food comes. Because if I had sent us off for lunch, because from what I've learned from other trainings, there was one training like this, I think was it last one? Where we said people should go for food first. It was a disaster because people had balanced and they did not now eat just rice. This was how they were pointing at poundo. By the time they came back, half the class was dozing, the other quarter was snoring. And so the next day I had to run through this section again because, people were not focused. But I also don't want a situation where people are so hungry that they become angry. And so they do not focus on what we are trying to do in class. All right, so I'm going to speed through this. And I'm going to speed through this because the most important part of the work is actually what we've done, which is building the business case. Because I promise you, you can tell a consultant to write your business plan for you. But what I've learned in practice is when you did not build the case yourself and you do not understand the reason why you're writing the business plan, the consultant will write their own plan, not your own plan for you. Consultants will say, I've written a plan before for a textile company. This must be what the issue is in your own company. And so they will go and write their own plan. And that's why I'm saying that there's nothing we'll talk about here that will be entirely new, but it's critical that you know the whys and the hows of why you're writing a plan, such that ultimately, whether you write the plan internally or you outsource it to a consultant, it would be a plan that is aligned with your company's priority. All right, let's get into it. This is finally working. I said it, this Abuja place. High-tech. All right, so why does a business plan matter? Let's speed through this. It helps to clarify your vision. But you see, what's most important about writing a business plan is not the clarification of the vision alone. It's that it clarifies your vision in a way that funders will understand. Imagine that I came here today and I was delivering this training in Spanish. Even if the slide is the same and I'm speaking Spanish, I'll be speaking to this bros, but his dictionary is only in English. He doesn't understand Spanish. And so I would have spent the past, number of hours delivering the training, the same content, the same material, but it is in a way, in a language that you do not understand. So it's critical that you have a business plan. You go to, the funders with a business plan, because the business plan is the way that they know to fund the company. They know that they can, if they go to the business plan, there is this section that they will go to check X. They'll go to that other section to check Y. And as such, it helps to clarify your vision, but it clarifies it in a way that, funders understand. The other thing is that it guides implementation. I always hammer on this, that I've seen well-written business plans without an implementation plan. It blows my mind that you can write a business plan, but you will not talk about how you intend to implement it. Who will be responsible for what? How long will it take to execute this plan? What departments would we be bringing along on the journey? So it's almost like saying that I'm traveling. I say to the pilots, we're flying from Lagos to Abuja, but you do not give them a flight path. Little wonder you can fly from Lagos. I'll be heading to Abuja, but your plane will land in Asaba. It happened in a country that I know. I'll leave that to your imagination. So it means that it's not even only important to have an implementation plan. It has to be the right one, because you can get a flight path. The flight path that is delivered to you, even though you are going to Abuja, is the one that is going to Asaba. And so you take off. There will be turbulence. And when you land, you say, welcome to Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport. But we'll look outside, and people will be saying, Kedu. All right, so all of this to say that you need an implementation plan. And what makes the flight path, let's use that analogy, correct, is that it not only shows you what the milestones are, it tells you what the action is that you will take, what timeline it will take, and who would be responsible for taking each one of those actions. Obviously, if you write a business plan in a language that funders understand, it helps to unlock financing, right? So when you go to BOI with a business plan that is aligned with what, the requirements are, well, you would get that money at 10p, at 10%. And finally, it helps to connect the dots. Even though we've said that it's critical that you think about value, but you'll notice that I keep saying balance values and value. It helps to connect the dots. A good business plan will not only talk about values, it will not only talk about value, but it will talk about both, and we'll talk about why both are important and why both are they're not negating each other necessarily, that both are, they are in sync with one another. A good business plan connects all the necessary dots. So what's the building block of a bankable business plan? This is another slide that I like, because this is another slide that can be contentious. When you look at this slide, you'll notice that executive summary is at the end. People constantly say to me that when I went to business school, I did this, I did that. An executive summary is the first thing that you should write. How can this, on your own slide, the executive summary is the last thing? Thankfully, we have English professor in this class. What is a summary? La kotoara. Summary means that there is a body of work that has been written and that you are now trying to distill into the key points. And so this does not suggest that when you write a business plan, the executive summary should be at the end. That's not what this is suggesting. This is saying that go through all the sections of the business plan and then summarize it at the end of the. Just will not abuse Abuja about it. This is high tech. High tech. Summarize it at the end of the day. I promise you, I've had people stop me during the training to say, no, I'm from a business school. Executive summary is what you write first. No, I have raised funds before. They said we should submit the executive summary first. I'm saying that a summary is not a summary if you are not summarizing a body of work. I'm saying this, there was someone who said to me that, well, I'm slightly high ranking, I'm an executive at my own organization. And so for me, when I get a business plan, I just want the highlights. I said, how can we show you highlight of a football match that they've not played? And so the point is not that the executive summary is not important, it's critical. In fact, it's because it is critical that we're saying that it should encapsulate every single section that's on the board. And how does it encapsulate that? It's by already working on those sections. All right. Oh, are you just... Yeah. Okay.
The time, most of the time, to go through your entire report. But when they see executive summary, they are able to see. So the summary, we should be able to pick the cogent points from all the chapters. So they said, you will have written all your reports, and you now come back and write the executive summary. That is the last thing to be written. That's how they explain it to us, why it has to be on the...
You see that mommy went to expensive school where they explain things properly to her. Because some people would say, oh, the way when I see the structure of a business plan, it starts with the executive summary, and as such, that's what we write first. All right, so what then are the building blocks? Again, I'm sure that you've seen this, but there are certain things we'll be touching on, like we just touched on why the executive summary should be written last. And so you start with the problem or the opportunity. After that, you talk about what the solution is. When we go past the solution, you say, well, this is the regulatory or market context. After that, we will talk about what the implementation plan is. Please include an implementation plan in your business plan. After that, we talk about financial strategy. Financial strategy is another interesting one. I have seen financial models for a business plan where the financial model says A and the business plan says B. For example, I've seen a financial model where the business plan that I was reading says that we intend to expand into 3 markets within the next 18 months. These markets, we've never played in them before, and this and such and such and such time is when we'll get into those markets. I was like, great, this looks interesting. I opened the financial model, and marketing cost was 0. So you want to disappear into a market, not market to them. Okay, if marketing cost is 0, are you going to recruit plenty staff that will do the legwork in these new places? No. I cannot see this thing inside the financial model, which is why the financial model does not stop. And I'm not looking at mommy from finance because I know she does her thing well. The financial, you'll see that this does not even say a financial model. This says a financial strategy because it involves how much are we going to raise? How are we going to raise this money? I have seen people build financial models and they will say cost of capital is 10%. Because when they were in school, every example they gave to them, cost of capital is always 10%. But that's a joke. It's a joke because even the risk-free rate in Nigeria today is not 10%. Mommy that invests in FGM bonds, how many percent did you call it? It's 12%. Okay. If you want to do your weighted average cost of capital, you now say that I will go and raise debt. You say you are going to a commercial bank. How can your cost of capital be 10%? But that is when people learn in school theory and not practical. And you will bring that model to come and meet someone like me. Now, I'm not a very smart person, but that's the problem. Because I'm not a very smart person, I usually break things down into their constituent elements. You say you want to raise this money from a commercial bank. I know that commercial bank will charge you 37%. How can your cost of capital be 10%? So because I'm a nice person, I'll take that your business plan and your financial model and I will just give it back to you nicely. Maybe you go to Lakpo to go and collect the money. All right. And then the other thing is that you get into risk and mitigation. Again, this is an interesting part. I will see people, they will do everything right in their business plan, but they will get to the section on risk and mitigation and they will list out the risk without including mitigation plan. So what you've done to me is that you've told me the reason why this thing will not work. You write a business plan, you include a risk section, but you do not include what the mitigation strategy will be. So you say, oh, one of our financial risks is that we're going to take a floating rate loan, meaning that it will be LIBOR plus something. And so there is financial risk there. Okay, now that you have interest rate risk, how do you intend to mitigate the interest rate risk if LIBOR does kalu up and down? You say there is foreign exchange risk because you are going to Germany to import the product. Okay, how are you going to mitigate the foreign exchange risk? What you've done is to list out the reason why this business will not work. So when you write the risk section, always ensure that you include a mitigation strategy. And then ultimately, of course, we said that you write your executive summary once you're done. All right. Now that I intentionally gave the overview on that page so that we can speed through the remaining part. What I've done with most of the remaining slides is to use the power of 3 that McKinsey taught us. McKinsey says that when you draw up a list, if you say it's 2 things, it looks like you did not do a lot of work. If you say it's 4 and above, it looks like that list is too long. So there is a magic in 3. Whether it's true or false, I don't know. But I know that McKinsey always collects plenty money. So it looks like they must know what they are saying. So what I've done is for most of the slides that we'll be going through now, I'll be giving you 3 critical elements of each one of the things that that I've put on board. So in the case of problem, when you want to write your problem statement or the problem statement, ensure that number 1, you describe what the operational challenge is. What are we trying to solve for? What's the issue in itself? After you talk about the challenge, you want to talk about the cost. So don't just say we're using a lot of diesel. Say we're using a lot of diesel that costs X, Y, Z. And then after that, you want to outline the opportunity for savings, compliance, or reputational benefits. Sometimes this opportunity is already implicit in the statement that you make because you've told us what the cost is. So I've given an illustrative problem statement on the board. On the screen, I beg your pardon. It says, the company currently spends 30 million naira annually on diesel generators due to grid unreliability. For some people that do not understand English like me, it means that PHCN, lights will go sometimes. Lights will come sometimes. Sometimes we'll hear that grid as in one country that I know, grid used to faint up and down. You'll be in training like this, power will just, in one country that I know. All right, so due to grid unreliability leading to elevated emissions and operating costs. How do we break this down into the 3 constituent elements that I spoke about? First is, well, the challenge is that we use high diesel due to grid unreliability. That's a problem. The cost is 30 million naira that we spend annually. And the opportunity for saving is that, well, if we solve this problem, implicit in that statement, we've said that would have cost savings and emissions reduction, because don't forget, we said there's elevated emissions and operating cost. The last thing I will say on this page is make no mistake that the problem statement you will write when you write your business plan will just be 2 lines. It will not be 2 lines. But I'm not one to give you what the appropriate size. What I always arm people with is a framework. Because if I say to you your problem statement has to be just 1 page, you might write half a page and that would have, summarized and properly encapsulated what the problem is. What's important is that whatever problem statement you write has these 3 key elements. It tells us what the challenge is, it tells us the attended cost, and it tells us the opportunity for savings. When you define the RECP solution, you see that 3 again. It's 3 things. The first thing is, again, similar to the problem, you want to describe what the solution is. This other one is also tricky, this technical approach. I find people who talk about the solution, but would not get into what the technical nuances of this solution is. It's either they don't get into the technical nuances at all, or it was an engineer that wrote the plan. And so that engineer will use 30 pages of the 35-page business plan to talk about the technical element of the solution. And when you go to BOI, because I know my bros at BOI, he's not an engineer himself. When he just sees nameplate cap, those big English that engineers like to use, that people like us that are not too smart and are not engineers, once I see the drawing up and down, I'm a nice person. So I'll take your business plan like this and I'll say, maybe you should go to Lakpo to go and collect the money. All right, so you want to get into the technical details, but you also don't want it to be full of technical jargon. Now, I haven't said that I should put a caveat. There's certain solutions that are just in and of themselves technical. And in those situations, it's on the funder to get a technical expert to help to review, the elements, the technical elements of the solution. Again, I'm not going to say to you how much technical language you should use in the plan. Ensure that there's a fine balance between trying to describe the technical aspect of the solution and remembering that there's someone on the other side that will review this and want to be sure that they understand what I've written. Final thing is that you've got to talk about how we align with RECP principles. Even though we want to prioritize value, we should never lose sight of the values element. So what's a sample solution statement? Installing a waste heat recovery system on the boiler flue would allow for preheating processed water, thereby reducing fuel demand by 25%. So we've spoken about the solution. It's a waste heat recovery system. There's some preheating of processed water in there, and there will be a reduction in fuel demand. It looks like this is 3 as well. The market and regulatory context. The 3 elements that are important in the market and regulatory context. First thing is that you want to talk about the industry overview and competitive dynamics. Do we have other competitors that have implemented this thing? Or do we have a competitive advantage if we implement it first? What does the industry currently say about this solution? Are there tax breaks that we would get from deploying this or not? Are there certain regulations that we should be mindful of by deploying this or not? The third element that people forget is how does this impact the customer, or what's the current supply chain challenges? So there was a time where, was it the Suez Canal that was blocked because I believe it was ship jammed themselves as though we were on Third Mainland Bridge. But in that situation, for example, there might be certain things you want to import that because, for example, you want to import maybe panels, and it's at a time where there's tariff on critical minerals that go into the production of panels. You want to also factor that into, your business plan. How does this impact us? If we had imported this last week or last year, this is what would have happened. Now that we want to import it now, how does this impact us? Is China now more disposed to sell to us? Because if they sell to the US, there are challenges there. There's increased, the tariff on that. And so those folks are not demanding it as much. And so they would rather sell to us. You want to think about all of those supply chain limitations or opportunities when you write the business plan. I'll spend a bit of time here because, again, people just don't write implementation plan. I don't know why. So, first question, do we want to deploy this internally or do we need an external consultant? Me, I will advise you to use external consultant, not like me, but me, so that I can charge you 500 million naira and charge you out of pocket expenses when you get that your 10% loan from BO. It's too expensive from you. You go and call Dr. JC. All right, so do we have in-house capabilities or are we going to use technical partners? Why should we use an external consultant when our people internally are able to deploy the solution? I find this a lot of times, that the people who can do the work internally, but there's just a cultural thing within that company to always use consultants. But in other cases, I see people who would say, we can do this thing internally, even though we do not have the internal capacity and capability to do the work. So it's a question we want to ask ourselves. Are we going to use internal team? Are we going to use external vendors? If we decide to use external vendors, what's their track record? Sometimes we say that they've done the work before, but have they done it at the scale we want them to do it? What are the nuances between what they've done in the past and what we want them to do? And can they convince us that they are able to deliver this? All right. The second thing is that sometimes you want to look at the site conditions and workforce readiness. So we already spoke about whether you want to do it internally or externally. But after answering that question, we also want to say, do we need to train our staff? Because sometimes we use an external vendor to deploy this solution, but the staff don't have the capacity or the training required to operate the system. So do we need to train them? This one on site condition is interesting to me because I met someone who said solar does not work. Why? They deployed rooftop solar, but the surface area of their rooftop was not sufficient to meet the load demand of their, of the property. And so they said solar doesn't carry the thing that we want it to carry. Did you use an engineer when you were sizing the solution? So your roof is tiny like this. You put solar on it because one roadside engineer came to talk to you. Now you are complaining that solar does not work. That's that first one. Do we have the space availability for the equipment we want to deploy? Can we access the site? The third one, critical. Please ensure that you have timeline, what the action is, and who will be responsible for the work. And that's why we've said engage stakeholders and engage them as when appropriate. Because if you write a plan and you go and give it to somebody to implement it, the person can very well say to you, I was never part of those that wrote this plan. I've got no clue about it. You can't come to me now and tell me to implement it. Even if you tell them to implement it and you force them to implement it, they will just implement their own thing and not what is in the plan. All right, so we want to ensure, because what this helps us to do is that it forces us to think about who the accountability partners will be and engage them early. All of this has to be underpinned by monitoring. Now, I know most of us are not fans of auditors. I was an ex-auditor. Now that I get audited, I don't like auditors. In fact, I ask myself, is this how people used to look at me when I was an auditor? But I now said, no, I was a good auditor. So I don't think they look at me like this. Here's how I know. I know you're a doubting Thomas, so I'll answer you. How do I know that I was a good auditor? Here's my approach. when I come to you, I don't say to you like most auditors do, here's your process, you didn't do it well. No, I will start by saying, I know that you've been doing this for a while. Can you walk me through your process? I don't know this thing. Can you tell me what the process is? So you walk me through the process. After I say, tell me, the next thing I will now say is, show me. By yourself, when you are showing me, maybe you say the process is from A to E. When you're now showing me, I'll say, it looks like you missed out step C. I'm sure you did not make a mistake. Maybe something happened. Can you tell me what happened with step C? By yourself, you will tell me. You see that by yourself, you've written the audit report. So when we take it to management, you will not say that the auditor just wrote a report that you are not aware about. You will say that you were aware of what happened. And when I go there, I will not say that there was a gap. I will say that there are enhancement opportunities. So people always think that I'm a good auditor. It's because I let you write your audit report by yourself. All right. And so it's critical that you bring the audit team along on the journey. Let's pretend that BOI is not in the room at the moment. It's because, like I said, if a solution has the potential to deploy, to give us maybe 50 million naira savings, if you deploy it and it's giving you 10 million naira savings, it's important that you sit yourself down and you ask yourself, why are we getting just 10 million? Is it the way that it was deployed? Is there something we haven't learned? Do we need to call the people that deployed it again to check? Is it just because this is early days? As we learn a lot more about the solution, we would ultimately get into the 15 million. Did we overestimate what the savings are? That's why it's critical that you monitor, stuff after you've deployed it. Don't just say, now we've done solar, we're not paying again. That's it. Because there's a potential that you might actually be getting, there might be potential for more savings than what you're currently getting. All right, we're almost there. Financial strategy. Again, this is not financial metrics. Don't throw IRR, ROI, this one, that one at me first. I promise you, when we come back in September, the secret that these bankers keep will come here and will reveal all their secrets. Why they will give you 5 million and not 10 million that you've requested for. We'll talk about it. Very important, you want to talk about your funding request. How much do we need? But more importantly, how will we raise this money? I want to get into some of the metrics and I'll just talk about two. But I promise when we come back, we'll calculate metrics, talk about what's important. I'm sure you all, most people know gross profit, net profit. The one that I want to talk about is debt service coverage ratio. The way I typically like to explain this is, there's a gentleman. He earns 30,000 naira per month. He goes to the bank to borrow money. When the bank calculated what his debt service would be, and debt service simply is how much you'll be repaying the bank, principal and interest. The debt service for the loan is requested for is 50,000 naira. But he earns 30,000 naira per month. So the gentleman was asked, how do you intend to repay this 50,000 naira, even though you only earn 30,000 naira? He said, the Lord shall supply all my needs according to his riches in glory. So what the banker said was that, I believe you, but you can go to Lakpo to go and collect that money. It is not in this bank that will give you money that you'd have to be paying 50,000 naira on. That's how bankers determine how much they should give to you. It's based on this DSCR. There's a target debt service coverage ratio that they need, meaning that they want to ensure that if you earn 30,000 naira per month, we know that you will pay rent. We know that you would feed. We know that you have family obligations. So I know Abuja is very cheap. You can pay rent and all of those from your 30,000 naira. They will say, okay, based on our models, what you will need every month is 20,000 naira. So we'll find a loan that both principal and interest repayments will not be more than 10,000 naira. And that's how we'll determine how much we would give to you. Because the one you walked into the bank for it is 50,000 naira that it will cost. And we are not going to give you that money because we know from the jump that you will not pay back. The DSCR is a tool that the banks use to size debt. In fact, they will not give you a loan of 30 that would give you debt service of 30,000 naira, because like I said, they expect that you have to eat and you have to drink. If you expand this out to a company, what they will look at is your earnings before interest and tax, and they will say how much of your earnings before interest and tax can cover the debt service. So imagine that your earning before interest and tax is 20 million. Their target debt service coverage ratio is 3, followed by anecdotes. Actually, let's use simple numbers. Your EBIT is 2. Your debt service, meaning principal and interest, is 1. Don't forget, the bank's target is 3. What they will say is, this 2 over 1 is 2. You cannot meet the target that we want. So what they will likely give you is a loan that the principal and interest will be 0.5. 2 divided by 0.5 for the people that know maths is what? 4. So that now that you have 4, they say, okay, you've gone past the threshold that we are comfortable with, and so they will calculate what loan would yield a debt service, meaning principal and interest of 0.5. That's what they will give to you. They will not give you the one that will yield debt service of 1. That is a secret that the bankers are hiding from you. What this means, though, is when we truly get into it, you can walk into a bank confident that you will get the amount that you ask for, because you would ask for an amount that your EBIT can cover and cover time and time again. But when we come in September, there will be more secrets that we'll unveil. Another one they use is interest coverage ratio, because there's certain loans that it is bullet repayment, meaning that you keep paying interest and it is at the end that you pay principal. So sometimes they do interest coverage ratio as well. They would not consider principal repayments. They would only focus on the interest payments. Do you have EBIT that will cover the interest repayment on a month-by-month basis? If you do, they will give you the loan. If you don't, they will calculate the one that they are comfortable with, and that's how they will size the loan. Yes, so there is one country that I know where these metrics don't apply. In that country, if the bank manager comes from the same village that you are from, don't attend September training. Because your own metrics is by blood relation. Just go and know the bank manager. All right. I kind of got at it before. EBIT, that's a great question, is earnings before. This man that knows bank manager. That's why he knows EBIT. What is EBIT? You see? Oh. I should have asked finance mommy what EBIT is. EBIT, and we'll get into it when we come back, is earnings before interest and tax. All he's saying is that when we take our revenue and we minus our operating expenses, we might have interest as well that we've borrowed loan from people, so there's an interest element to it. Before we deduct interest and taxation, what is our earnings? That's earnings before interest and tax, right? So I sell water. This water, I bought it for 10 naira. I'm selling for 20 naira. 20 minus 10 is your earnings. But I have to pay tax to the government. So my profit after tax is not 10 because I have to still remove tax. But maybe I have borrowed money, right, to buy my inventory. I have to pay interest. So my profit is not 10. When I get to 10, I still have to remove interest and then taxes. So 10 is my earnings before interest and taxes. That's EBIT. We will not get into free cash flow to firm and free cash flow to equity today, even though those are things that mommy would like and will be excited by. But we will learn all these things. Now, make no mistake. Me, I like to under-promise and over-deliver. I'm not going to make you guys accountants because mommy is already looking at me that, well, if the engineers become accountants, will this not be the proverbial CTO that we were talking about earlier, where we said that there's a rising star in the organization that can now do the work? If the engineers have become accountants now, well, we don't need accountants again. And because me, myself, I'm an accountant as well, what I'm trying to do is one, engineers, fantastic people, never or rarely ever know how to present a business case because they are often focused on the technical element of the solution. What this would help you do is we then say bring in the stakeholders into the room. The finance person is talking and you do not understand anything that they're saying. What the training would help you to do is to at least have a meaningful conversation with the finance person. Ultimately, the role of building a financial model is still mommy's job. But in case you don't have someone as smart and sharp as mommy in your organization, some of us know how to build financial model. It's just that I will charge you only 500 million naira. All right. Final phase, risk and mitigation. Again, please do not just list out your risk. Please talk about a mitigation. I'll give just one example here and move away from it. People are already smelling the food. There's one brother that I've seen. He's just been doing like this since. Like, Baba, say what you want to say and let's go and I will not call out the brother's name. All right, so which one can we use as an example? Let's use financial risk. And forget what's even on the board. I've said that imagine that you want to import an equipment. You're going to buy it in dollars. You earn in naira. That means there's foreign exchange risk that is attached to that acquisition. So what can be the mitigation strategy? For example, you can go to the bank and do something called a forward contract. What that forward contract means is that whatever happens to naira and dollars in this world, when I come on such and such date, this is the rate at which you would give me FX. Whether our banks are happy to do it or whether there's a certain size is another conversation. But that's the kind of strategy that you can include so that when I see it, I can say, oh, actually, this makes sense. It really doesn't matter what the FX rate is in the future. You've hedged, that's the English. That's what it's called hedging. You've hedged your FX risk. There's another one. Let's talk about technical risk and we'll call it a day. There's the potential that you deploy HEDGING. I'm a Yoruba boy, so sometimes my H factor jumps out. That's why. Apologies. All right, so let's talk about maybe technical risk. There's the risk that you deploy this thing and it does not give you the amount of energy savings that you want. How do you think that you would have mitigated that? Remember that thing that we said, that in that particular, I think it's the juice company, they decided that when they want to deploy their LED lights, they would start from the packaging area. So when we test it out in the packaging area and we see the amount of savings that we get, we'll then expand it out to the other parts of the business. That's one simple, I'm not saying that's the only way to do this, but you can do pilot testing and that can be the way to really see whether you will get the kind of savings that you want. Sometimes it's including what they call performance guarantees in the contract. You see why I said that it's not just the technical guys that are involved. Sometimes you need your lawyers, the legal team at the table as well, to help you draft out a contract that makes sense. So they could have drafted a contract that says, you're guaranteeing us that at the minimum, we'll get such and such savings. If we do not get those savings, here is what you pay us in damages, right? That's why I've said, ensure that you bring in all the necessary stakeholders as at when due. All right, this is just more risks. This part I always call other considerations, but someone stopped me in my tracks in Lagos, I believe, and said, no, this cannot be other considerations. These are also critical considerations. Environmental and social elements of that project. While we've been hammering on value, it's important that we do not lose sight of values. And we said that this thing looks like it is simple, but it can be the deciding factor on whether your project will move forward or it wouldn't move forward. And I touched on it earlier, that a certain community, stopped the project because they said there will be water contamination through the deployment of that project. And that's the only reason, even though the land has been bought, even though the monies have been deployed, capital has been deployed, the community said no to it. Another example, and this one is like, even to me, it's weird. We're going to install wind turbines in a country that I know, and some person was driving down, heard about this and said, no, this will cause visual pollution. That when I drive down the highway, I like that I can see the greenery. If you install wind turbines on the road, it will cause visual pollution to me. I promise you, in this said country, they got enough people to write to the government and they shut down that project. How do you shut down a project because people say the road will not be beautiful enough? So I promise you, these other considerations that I just called other sometimes can be the deciding factor between the success or the failure of a project. With these few words of mine, I hope I've been able to convince and not to confuse. Where's that, my English brother? But before we close for the day, let's run through what we did today. When we started, we said that we did not come here 18 months ago. And so we said we wanted to level the playing field for Abuja. We started by doing a refresher on what was done in other locations. We defined what resource efficiency is. We discussed what cleaner production is. We defined IE. From there, we spoke about the key drivers of RECP and IE. We said there are 4. We said that it can be cost. We said that it can be environmental. We said that it can be... people are sleeping. It can be growing demand. And we said that it can be because of funding. After we spoke about the energy, about the key drivers, we moved away from the key drivers and we got into the mismatch between the plan in Nigeria and what the banks are doing. We spoke about what the banks are doing today. Someone said that they do not believe that BOI would deploy the money that they said they would deploy. But we convinced her, even though she's a doubting Thomas, and we said the BOI would deploy that capital. We moved away from that and we said that our funding can be cheap, like grants, or can be expensive, like equity. After we talked about the refresher, we then moved into what? We moved into how to develop a business case. When we got into developing a business case, we spoke about the prioritization framework for developing a business case. We said that when you identify the gap, you can decide to do something or do nothing. If you do something, you identify your solution set and then engage the right stakeholders. After you've done those two, you go and do a quantitative and a qualitative assessment of those solutions. After that, we said that you should rank your solution and think about which one is most feasible. When you're done doing that, you move into funding. Are you going to fund this internally or are you going to fund it externally? Is it going to be debt or is it going to be equity? From that, I told you that as consultants, you can create that same slide in 2 ways. And so we brought up the opportunity matrix. We We said the opportunity matrix has 3 elements. You think about cost, impact, and ease of implementation. When we did that, we did classwork. People argued and ultimately agreed. After that, we taught ourselves about another kind of matrix. We said it is the cost impact matrix or the 2x2 matrix. We said there is high impact, low impact, high cost, low cost. We did a class exercise right after that. And we decided that posting signage is not LED signage, that it is not English class that we are in. But we said ultimately, what is costly to one company may not be costly to another company. And we said what is ultimately important is tying everything to the strategic priority of the company. When we were done with that, we told ourselves some critical questions we should ask when we get into those conversations with our colleagues. We said you should ask questions around public statement, ask questions about the solution, ask questions around metrics. After we were done with that section, we were almost going to move into the next section, but we said, wait, that you should ask yourself about the operating cost before implementation and operating cost after implementation. Then we moved into how to write a business plan. We said that do not forget that executive summary, if you did not go to a good school like my mommy did, the executive summary is the last thing you should write because an executive summary summarizes a body of work. So we said you should write your problem statement. There are 3 elements for a problem statement. We said you should write your solution statement. There are 3 elements for a solution statement. We said implementation, industry context, and regulatory context is critical as you develop your business plan. After that, we said you should write an implementation plan. That please never forget to write an implementation plan. We said you should decide whether that plan will be developed, whether the solution will be deployed internally or externally. We said you should think about the site that you will deploy this thing. Do you have enough space to deploy it? After that, we moved away from that and we said 3 things are important. Ensure that you write the timeline, the milestone, the person involved, and who the accountability partners are. Finally, we spoke about auditors, that we should bring auditors into this space. From there, we moved into financial strategy. We said this is strategy, not metrics. We said the financial strategy should speak to the business plan itself. After that, we spoke about risks and mitigation. We said that do not just list out your risk. Ensure that you always include a mitigation strategy. Because if you write risk without a mitigation strategy, what will happen is that you will ultimately go to LACBO because you've told us the reason why the business will not work. After that, we said there are other considerations. But we should never think that they are just other considerations, that they are not important, because they are important. They can be the final deciding factor between a business or a project that will work and the one that will not work. Okay, now, with these few words of mine, I hope I've been able to convince and not to confuse you that RECP projects and IE projects are important. Thank you.
No question, nothing. No question.
They're insisting that you should ask questions, but it looks like you don't have questions. So, but before I let you guys go, I'll just give you a quick overview of what we'll be doing tomorrow. The case study tomorrow.
I believe we've all received our meal tickets. So let's have our lunch, network, and let's have our lunch, network, and see bright and early tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ego Abba Kingsley, representing HSM International, one of the industries in this program. This is actually not my first time here. I was here at the capacity building and the methodologies, but today it happens to be the financial and investment aspect of it. So I'm so happy to be here. And my take home from this training is to know more about the investment part of this training. Because I've been I've been following this training right from the beginning, right from the onset, when we discuss about the methodologies, the approaches. But this particular section deals with the investment, the money part of it, which is why I'm really here, to know how to make money from this. Because as we all know, the carbon market is an upcoming field for money at this moment.